What's up, nerds? It's Zach the Goblin here. Warhammer 40k is such an amazingly interesting universe, but it has so much lore you might be stuck on where to even start. A lot of people will want to start with the Horus Heresy, but with over 50 books, it might feel like a daunting task. That is where the Horus Heresy Explained Quickly series comes in. In this series, I explain the plot of each of the Horus Heresy books. This is for people who want to get into the series but don't have time to invest to reading all the books, people who are jumping around the series but maybe want some added context, or even people who just want a quick refresher. If you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe to see more books explained, and let me know what your favorite books are in the comments below. Without further ado, this is the Horus Heresy Explained Quickly, Book 2, False Gods. So this story starts with Petronella Vivar. She's on her way to the Vengeful Spirit to petition Horus to be his personal remembrancer. She's sitting there thinking about all the other Primarchs, and I'm like, yeah, they're all cool and all, but Horus, man. Horus is the War Master. He stands above all the others. Then she starts to think about the other remembrancers, Kirill Cinderman, Ignace Kakazi, and Euphrates Keeler. And she's sitting there thinking like, yeah, they're all cool and all, but like, I'd be way better. And that's when her bodyguard Maggard comes in, and he's going to be important for the story later. But he's basically an indentured servant, and he has his vocal cords cut out so he can't actually talk. So he's just basically entirely devoted to protecting Petronella Vivar. Next, it cuts to the Vengeful Spirit, and we're following Jonah Arukin. And through him, we are introduced to what a Titan is. In this case being the Imperator Titan, the Dies Irae. Titans are essentially these big-ass mechs. They're way bigger than everything. They dwarf everything on the battlefield. They're just these god engines of destruction. However big you're thinking, they're probably bigger. The Dies Irae, for example, was stated at being about 43 meters tall, so about 130 feet. For reference, it's said that a typical Gundam is only about 18 meters tall, which is roughly the height of a 6-story building. Then you see some back and forth between him and some soldiers, as well as him and another crew member, Titus Cassar. Cassar being a follower of the Lectitio Divinitatis, which again will be important later, and in later books. We then actually jump a little bit forward in time to Mercedes Olatin watching Loken in the sparring cages. And as usual, she's thirsting a little bit. She might not want to admit it, but she definitely is. I'm going to read you a little passage from this section of the book. Loken wiped the sweat from his face and upper body as he made his way to his personal arming chamber. Mercedes followed him and, as usual, could not help but admire the sheer physical perfection of his enhanced physique. The ancient tribes of the Olympian hegemony were said to have called such specimens of physical perfection Adonian, and the word fit Loken like a masterfully crafted suit of Mark IV plate. Almost without thinking, Mercedes blink-clicked the image of his body. "You're staring," said Loken without turning. Momentarily flustered, she said, "Sorry, I didn't mean..." "I'm teasing. I don't mind. If I am to be remembered, I'd like it to be when I was at my peak, rather than a toothless old man drooling into my gruel." "I didn't realize Astartes aged," she said, regaining her composure. Loken shrugged, picking up a carved Rembrandt and a polishing cloth. "I don't know if we do either. None of us have ever lived long enough to find out." And then Mercedes kind of goes on to philosophize about like how melancholic it should be, because they're effectively immortal, and how it kind of detaches them from humanity, all of that. But then Abaddon comes in, and his only goal right now seems to be to just be a dick. He notices that during his training, Loken gets cut, so he just comes in talking shit to Loken, being like, so why are you such a pussy? Maybe if you hung out with warriors instead of remembrancers, you'd be better and you wouldn't get cut. We then get a scene between Malachurst, Horus's equerry, and Horus himself. In this, we start to actually see some of Horus's personality flaws and cracks in his armor, so to speak. After the debacle with the Interrex in the last book, his confidence is a little shaken. Malachurst asking, "Yo, are you good?" And Horus being like, "Honestly, dog, I don't even know anymore." Malachurst came there because he had a message that Petronella Vivar was petitioning to be Horus's remembrancer. And Horus eventually says, "Loki, I definitely deserve to be remembered, so I will hear her out." So fast forward, the Sons of Horus have been called to a war council on a previously made compliant world of Davin. And at this war council, Horus is given a speech, and he's like, "Yo dudes, we did it. It's pretty sick. Davin's compliant. Basically, the Empire's great." But during that, Erebus comes in. Again, we fucking hate this guy. He comes in and interrupts. He's like, "Well, actually, I wouldn't say it's really compliant." And Horus is pissed. Everybody's pissed. They're like, you don't interrupt the War Master, right? Especially if you're just some normal space marine. So Horus is like, "The fuck you talking about, dude?" And Erebus is like, "Well, actually, the person you left in charge Commander Temba kind of fucked off and went to the moon, and they're doing sorcery and shit. Also, I don't agree with him, but like, he definitely said that you were a big pussy and you wouldn't do anything about it. And I'm just saying, if that were me, I wouldn't like, take that laying down. I'd probably go do something about it. But obviously, teach their own. This is your decision. And eventually Horus was like, well, shit, dog, I'm not a bitch, so like, I gotta go. So, hey, let's go. We're gonna go to the moon and take care of this. While this is going on, well, before this council, Garviel Loken had Ignace Kakasi watch Erebus because he doesn't trust him. And he's like, hey, watch him, see if anything's fishy is going on. And at the beginning, he actually saw Abaddon hand something over to Erebus. So after the council, Ignace and Loken meet up, and Ignace is like, yo, Erebus, he's whack. He was definitely lying. Or at the very least, he wasn't telling the whole truth. And Loken's like, what do you mean? And he's like, think about it. Most people can barely even look Horus in the eye without forgetting what they were gonna say. He is way too much of a Chad for somebody to talk shit about him like that. So I sincerely doubt that Commander Temba actually did that. And also, what Erebus was doing was obviously like a performance. Like, he came in and interrupted right at the perfect time for maximum drama. It was almost like he was goading Horus into going to the moon. It's like he wants Horus to go to Davin's moon for an ulterior motive. And at this moment, as always, they're interrupted by Abaddon, and he's here again to be kind of a dick. And he's like, yo, Erebus is my guy? The fuck? Who do you think you're talking about? And there's a little back and forth, and Abaddon's turning to go to leave. But before he can actually leave, Ignace says, hey, Abaddon, can I ask you something? And Abaddon's like, no. Ignace, being a little bit of a chat in this moment, asks anyways. He's like, so, what's that silver coin you gave Erebus? And Abaddon just immediately gets pissed, and Loken's like, oh shit, get out of here. So Ignace gets the fuck out of there, and then Loken kind of holds Abaddon back, because Abaddon would have killed him. And he's like, yo, so what the fuck was that silver coin? Is it the lodge? And Abaddon's like, I can't say. Which basically means, like, it's definitely the lodge. Like, that's kind of like their code word, mean like, if it's talked about at the lodge, it stays there. They have to say they can't say. So he's basically confirming, yes, it's about the lodge. And he's like, what, you guys bringing in other people from the other legions into this? I thought this was our shit. And Abaddon's like, well, no, you misunderstand. We didn't bring Erebus into the lodge. Erebus was the one who initially brought the lodges to us. So it was his idea to begin with. And Loken's just like, oh, fuck, that can't be good, can it? We then go over to Petronella Vivar's meeting with Horus. And she's like trying to convince him. And he's like, well, why do I need you? Basically. And they go back and forth. And she kind of shows spunk. She kind of shows a little defiance to Horus. And he's like, yo, actually, I like that. And he's like, you know what? I do deserve to be remembered. I am pretty sick. So actually, you can be my personal remembrancer. It's a deal. So they finally get to Davin's moon, and they go to land, and it is gross and stinky. It's basically a swamp, like a putrid swamp. Everything's kind of decayed and gross. Last they heard, it was supposed to be a forest. So obviously, something bad happened here. So they're trudging through the swamp, and as they're going, they notice, wait a minute, there's like a bunch of corpses here. And a lot of them seem to be the rogue commander's men, actually. So what's going on here? Uh-oh, zombies. They all spring to life and they start attacking them with their rotted corpses. They start dragging Space Marines under the waters. None of the Space Marines, none of them, the Sons of Horus, have seen anything like this. So they're like, what's going on here? It's chaos. It's chaos. There's a thick fog. It's messing with Vox channels. So there's, it's basically a horror scene. They're just like, we don't even know how to kill these things. They just keep on getting back up. They're zombies, effectively. So like, what do we do? We got to group up. During all of this, Petronella Vivar was told that she couldn't go to the moon, but she didn't listen to anybody, so she took her own personal craft down there, and during it, she gets shot down. So she crashes down into the swamp, and it immediately just gets surrounded by plague zombies. But lucky for her, she has her bodyguard, Maggard, and he holds him off, and he has a sword, and when he is hitting the plague zombies with his sword, they actually stay dead, which isn't happening across all the other battles. Because the crash created a fire, it actually acted as a beacon for the Sons of Horus. Horus and his men then grouping up there. Horus noticed what happened. He's like, wait, this normal human, Maggard, held off all these plague zombies by himself? He's like, damn, this white boy's sick. What's your name? And of course, Maggard can't speak. Vivar's kind of like, well, he can't say his name. And he's like, Horus is like, what, he doesn't know Gothic? The fuck? She's like, no, he literally can't speak. We cut out his vocal cords, and Horus obviously isn't down for that. He's like, that's kind of whack. But he's like, hey, you are a true warrior. You're kind of a badass. Respect, dog. And Magard drops to his knees, tears in his eyes because he's getting praise from the fucking War Master. So this is like a big deal, obviously. So then the Sons of Horus continue on and end up finding Temba's crashed ship. And Horus is like, okay, I guess we gotta go in there, obviously. We gotta kill this guy. Loken and Torgotten, you guys keep your squads out here, cover the rear. And Loken and Torgotten's like, what the fuck? This kind of doesn't seem like what we should do. We should be there with him, but, you know, we're gonna follow orders, so that's fine. So then Horus and his men enter the ship, and there's like this big crash, like things start falling apart. Horus gets separated from everybody, but he ends up making his way to the command center, where Yugen Temba actually already killed some of his men. And Horus is like, yo dog, it's time. We're fighting. So they start fighting. Yugen Temba's like, you left me behind. I can't believe you. He felt slighted that the Great Crusade went on without him, and he was left to govern this world. Even though he was a soldier, he didn't feel like this is what he was good for. And they're fighting, and Horus notices that he's moving a lot better than a normal human should. And that is because he's wielding the Anathame, which is the demon sword that ArhPriest stole from the Enterex at the end of the last book. And this thing corrupted him bad. He's a big mass of rotten flesh, surrounded by flies, wearing the tattered remains of his uniform. So they're fighting, and Horus is able to get the death blow, but not before he was given a really gnarly wound by the Anathame. Right before Yugen Temba died, he finally kind of reverts back to his normal self, and he's horrified that he was able to be corrupted by chaos. He's like, oh shit, what have I done? And him and Horus kind of have like a heart-to-heart, and he dies in Horus's arms. And Horus is distraught because they were friends once upon a time. So Horus gets out of the ship and meets up with his men, and they're like, oh shit, you got wounded pretty bad, and it's still bleeding. That shouldn't be happening, right? And Horus is like, nah, I'm good. But Horus was most notably not good, and he collapses. And everybody's horrified because they have never seen this before. He's essentially like a god figure. They've never seen him that badly wounded where he passed out in front of them, in front of his Mornaval, a bunch of his Space Marines, and Petronella Vivar. And here's a little excerpt. Puzzled, she looked up in time to see the War Master's eyes roll back into their sockets and his legs buckle beneath him. She screamed, reaching out with her hands towards him, knowing that she was powerless to help him, but needing to try to prevent his fall. Like a slow-moving avalanche or a mountain toppling, the War Master collapsed. The memo quill scratched at the data slate, and she wept as she read the words there. I was there the day that Horus fell. So they rush him back to the Vengeful Spirit, and the Mornaval's like freaking out because they're like, yo, our Gene Father might be dying. We don't know what's going on. We've never seen a Primarch in a state like this. We didn't even know if this was possible. And news actually goes out ahead of them. So when they get to the Vengeful Spirit in the embarkation deck, there's a bunch of people there, and they're freaking out because they're like, oh my god, they're all there to mourn a little bit because they're like, we all love Horus the War Master. We need to see what's going on because we care. So the crew's like hovering around, and the Mornaval's trying to get through the crowd to get Horus to the apothecaries. And they just can't get through, and people aren't moving because they want to know what's going on. So the Astartes do what Astartes do best, and they start hitting and beating the shit out of people along the way. And these people are just normal people, so they're not just hitting and knocking them down or breaking a couple bones. They're killing a good amount of these people, and they're trampling them and massacring them to get their War Master to the apothecaries. And this is something that's definitely going to come back and bite them in the ass later. And the apothecary is doing everything that he can to keep Horus alive, but just like him, he has no idea. Primarchs are literally built different than even Astartes. Like, they have different organs and stuff. He's like, I don't really know what I'm doing. Really, only the Emperor himself would know. So Horus is in and out of consciousness, and at this point he calls for his remembrancer, Petronella Vivar, and he starts to give her his valediction. And basically he's like, honestly, being War Master was too much for me. I promised my father no mistakes. Obviously, I haven't fulfilled on that. He talks about how Gilliman and the Lion would laugh at him and say, like, you know, he can never read the hearts of men, and that they were right. You know, he couldn't, he's obviously made mistakes, and that, you know, honestly, somebody else should have been War Master, probably Sanguinius. He's the best of all of us, you know, and he's just kind of expressing doubts about his own place in the universe, you know, because he's on his deathbed, so he's finally just being honest with himself and his own personality flaws. And so everybody in the Mornaval and is kind of like, yo, what do? We can't let Horus die. He's our dude. He's our Gene Father. He's our leader. We can't let him die. So Torgotten and Loken are like, hey, let's go back to the planet and see if we can find something that'll save Horus. You know, so obviously something weird injured him that isn't normal. Maybe if we can find what injured him, what cut him, we can come up with some kind of antidote or a cure or something. You know, they're grasping at straws, but anything's better than just sitting on their hands. So they're gone. And then about the same time, ArhPriest comes around, of course, and he meets with the Lodge and the rest of the Mournival, so Little Horus and Abaddon. And he's like, so, you know, what if we do this? And he's like, I know a way, you know. It isn't necessarily up to code, but, you know, you want to save your Gene Father, right? You want to save the War Master. Let's do a little bit of sorcery. You know, just hear me out. You know, maybe that's a good idea. But obviously, if you don't want to save him, that's on you guys. You know, I'm not saying you have to do this, but this really is the only way. And they all agree because they're just, you know, they just anything to save Horus, they'll do it. So while that's going on, Loken and Torgotten are back on the moon of Davin, and they actually find the sword, the Anathame. Loken's like, this reeks of Erebus. So they come back to give the sword to the apothecary, so maybe he can like come up with some kind of cure. But by the time they get back, Horus is already inside the Serpent Temple on Davin, and he's already sealed away. And Loken and Torgotten come up to the other two of the Mournival and are like, yo, what the fuck? What are we doing here? And Little Horus and Abaddon's like, we're doing what must be done. And Loken's like, this is sorcery. This isn't good. Also, this is ArhPriest's fucking fault. He's the one playing us. Why are you following what he says? This guy's a little bitch. And they have a big fight about it, and they're split right down the middle, with Little Horus and Abaddon being for this ritual to save Horus, and Loken and Torgotten being very much against it. So this part goes back and forth between what's happening on the Vengeful Spirit and outside the temple, and what's happening in Horus's near-death dreams. But instead of going back and forth, I'm going to talk about what's happening on the outside, and then at the end of this part, I'll talk about Horus's dreams in one go, just for clarity and consistency, so I'm not jumping back and forth. So on the Vengeful Spirit, Loken wants to find out more about this house, this Temple of the Serpent. So he goes and he finds Kirill Cinderman, who's been in the archives this whole time. And Kirill just starts yapping, right? He's like, no, yeah, there's this, like, serpent means, it's like this word in this old language, yada, yada, yada. And he's just like, yeah, it's like connected to chaos. And Loken's like, oh, fuck, serpent cults are connected to chaos. And in the last book, if you remember, he had a run with chaos. He still doesn't quite know, like, what chaos really is, but he knows it's not good. He's like, ooh, shit, this isn't good. You know, whatever's going to happen, whether or not it saves the War Master, you know, we don't really want to be messing with chaos, so this isn't ideal. Elsewhere, the massacre on the embarkation deck is having some downstream effects, and Ignace Kakasi is talking mad shit through his poetry, being like, yo, the Astartes are kind of actually bad. They're not even really human. And this sentiment isn't exactly unique. It is shared with a lot of the human populace after what happened, with Hector Varvarus, who is a commander of the Imperial Army contingent attached to the 63rd expedition, actually calling for justice and like punishment of the Astartes who took part in the massacre. And really across the board, everything's kind of in a bad place right now. Euphrates Keeler is attacked on Davin by soldiers because of her commitment to the Lictitio Divinitatis, because Emperor worship is still a big no-no. But luckily she is saved by Tarek Torgotten, who brings her to Kirill Cinderman to kind of watch over her. And so she gets to Kirill Cinderman, and he's like translating this book. It happens to be the Book of Lorgar, who's another Primarch, who's already actually fallen to chaos, but it doesn't really get into that in this book. So while translating it, the words on the book kind of change, and they're able to read it, but they're like, we shouldn't be able to read this. And they can't stop. So they keep on going, and lo and behold, summons a demon. And they're being chased by this thing. They're like, oh fuck, oh shit, oh fuck, oh shit. Ultimately, Euphrates Keeler stops and grabs her pendant. It's a silver eagle, the symbol of the Emperor, and holds it out in front of her and channels the Emperor's power through it and banishes the demon with holy flames, which then cements Euphrates Keeler as being a living saint, and ultimately leads to more worshippers of the Lictitio Divinitatis and Emperor worship as a whole. Okay, so I saved it for this part, but in part 2, we're introduced to Magnus the Red and his favorite son, Azek Ahriman. And this is like fresh off the Council of Nicaea. That could be its own video, so I'm not going to go too heavy into it here, and they don't really talk about it in the book. But essentially, Magnus the Red is the Primarch of the Thousand Sons. They are heavy-duty psychers. They kind of were going too far into the warp, so the Emperor had this council to kind of say, hey, should we even allow this shit? Ultimately, they said no, so Magnus was just sanctioned. But he's kind of like, I don't really care, I gotta save Horus, because he kind of sees the future a little bit, so he knows what's gonna happen. So he's like, I gotta stop this from happening, basically. So he's gonna project himself into Horus's dreams to dissuade him from turning to chaos. So Horus's dream takes up a couple chapters, but I'm really gonna give you the cliff notes here. Essentially, Erebus and Magnus are both in his dreams, both trying to pull him over to one side. Magnus trying to keep him on the rightful path, Erebus trying to convince him to join with Chaos. Erebus taking the form of Pastor Sejanus. So he has shown a bunch of things. He's actually shown the future, like the real future of what it's like in actual 40k. And it's showing that like everybody worships the Emperor and only half the Primarchs are remembered, Horus notably being absent. And he's like, I'm the War Master of the Great Crusade. Why did everybody forget about me? And Erebus is like, well, it's because the Emperor actually wants to make himself a god. He's going to betray you. He doesn't actually care about you. He's going to betray you, and so are half of your brothers. The irony here is this is the future that happens because Horus joined the Emperor. But Erebus frames it as, hey, you got to stop the Emperor or else this will happen. So it's kind of a little trick from Chaos. He's also shown visions of the past, of his own creation in the labs on Terra, and the subsequent event that scattered all the Primarchs, which was the Chaos Gods creating this rift in the warp, which scattered them all to the corners of the galaxy. The whole time, Magnus, in the form of a one-eyed wolf, is being like, yo, no, this is whack. Don't listen to them. They're trying to trick you. They're trying to corrupt you. Don't stray from the Emperor's light. This is bad. Erebus, obviously a bitch. Come on, don't be stupid. You know, I'm your brother. You can trust me. I'm literally your brother. I love you. I have your best interests in heart. Come on, man. Horus being like, honestly, I can't trust either of you. You guys are both bitches. I've made my choice. While not explicitly said here, it is obviously to work with Chaos. I mean, the guy's name's Horus Heresy, so this part ends with Horus leaving the temple alive and well to the elation of all of his men. Torgotten and Loken are super happy. Everyone chanting Lupercal for their revived War Master. Some time passes, the expedition encounters the Arhetian technocracy, and notably, unlike the Interrex, Horus doesn't really try to go for a peaceful solution this time. He is a changed man. Horus secretly has a meeting with the Mechanicum's adept Regulus, and he's like, hey, we're gonna kill them all, and I'm gonna give you guys these valuable STCs. You guys are gonna support me, right? Whenever I rebel. That'd be pretty sick if you did. And Regulus is like, yo, STCs? You know, we're horny for this technology. Of course we're gonna support you. Later, the Lodge summons Tarek Torgotten to lay out a plan to have Loken executed to appease Hector Varvarus, who is still lobbying for justice for the victims. And Torgotten's like, fuck no, I'm not gonna do that. Garviel Loken's my boy. I'm not gonna do some whack shit like that. So they continue to fight the Arhetian technocracy, and they're actually joined by Angron and the World Eaters, who, to very much just oversimplify them as a legion, they're just murder hobos. With this campaign dragging on for another 9 months, during which some Emperor's children come to visit, including Fabius Bile, who is another very notable character for this setting, who ends up giving it to his Primarch Fulgrim. The war against the technocracy is reaching its conclusion, right? World Eaters are creating mayhem. Angron runs ahead at the final charge and ends up getting blown up by a bunch of landmines, and everybody's like, oh shit, did we just watch somebody die? But the Sons of Horus and the World Eaters together, they storm, they make it over, and they have the technocracy beat. They're defeated, and they are right about ready to give up. Hector Varvarus is there to accept the surrender, but right before they can actually do that, Angron just bursts out of the rebel and just starts slaughtering people. So the Astartes are like, well, I guess we're just killing all of them. So, you know, they kill everybody there. And in the confusion, Varvarus is actually killed himself. So the technocracy is done with. So now Horus decides to clean house. Magard, Petronella Vivar's bodyguard, is now a super simp for Horus because he complimented him. So Horus sends him to murder Ignace Cocracy because obviously he's been talking mad shit with his poetry, and Horus can't have any dissenters. And Horus himself goes and visits Petronella Vivar and murders her because on his deathbed, if you remember, he gave his valediction, and he needs to make sure that none of that ever sees the light of day. Loken and Torgotten find out about all this, and they're like, okay, I really don't believe Ignace Cocracy killed himself. And also, Varvarus was definitely killed by a bolter, so he wasn't killed by the technocracy. Somebody on our side killed him, obviously because he was a naysayer, and he was very vocal against Horus. He was a dissenter, so he was killed. So they're both like, we gotta stop all this bullshit at any cost. Even if it kills us in our fighting death, we need to uphold the honor of the Luna Wolves. At the end of the book, there's a secret meeting with Horus and half the Mornival and some of the Warrior Lodge. And he's like, okay, fuck the Emperor. We're gonna run shit now. And we're gonna take out everybody who stands against us. Basically mask off. He's evil now. Surprise. And they talk about all the plans they have, where he's like, okay, don't worry, Magnus is not going to leave Prospero alive. He states some of his other treacherous plans for some of his other brothers, and he states that some of them are already or will soon be on his side. And I will end with the final excerpt of the book. That will take time, said Erebus. Horus nodded. It will, yes, but it will be worth it in the long term. In the meantime, I have dispatched mobilization orders to those legions I do not believe we can sway. The Ultramarines will muster at Calth to be attacked by Cor Pharon of the Word-Bearers, and the Blood Angels have been sent to the Cygnus cluster, where Sanguinius shall be mired in blood. Then we make a swift, decisive stroke on Terra. That still leaves other legions, said Regulus. I know, answered Horus. But I have a plan that will remove them as a threat to us once and for all. I will lure them into a trap from which none will escape. I will set the Emperor's Imperium ablaze, and from the ashes will arise a new master of mankind. And where will you set this trap? Asked Malagurst. Place not far from here, said Horus. The Istvan system. And this will be continued in Book 3, A Galaxy in Flames. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you would like to see more of these videos, or if you feel like I missed anything even. Thank you again so much. Goblin out.